Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week's anime review is going to be very interesting because, much like Rumbling Hearts was a little bit darker than it needed to be, this one certainly fits the bill as well. I'm talking about Lupin III, the woman called Fujiko Mine. Now, Lupin III's been a staple of the anime scene and the manga scene for almost 50 years at this point. So not the longest property in existence, but certainly one of them. And Lupin itself, as far as anime goes, gets a lot of different interpretations and a lot of different seasons or new series or movies. I know there was the Castle of Cagliostro. There was other ones. I think they've done Detective Conan ones. This one was about a decade ago, and this one went for an interesting tack, because rather than focusing on Lupin, they went for Fujiko instead. Now, Fujiko as a character is femme fatale, personified. And it's interesting because Lupin's kind of always played that roguish thief gentleman character who's very, very sleazy. And it gets him in trouble almost all the time. So to play somebody opposite him, because he's almost too good at his job, he fails heists and, weird things like that here and there. But a lot of the time, it's due to subterfuge. And to play somebody opposite Lupin, to be both a love interest, but also somebody that plays against him, you have to have somebody who is just as full of guile, but also stacked beyond belief. And Fujiko fits that bill. But they never really... I don't think they've ever tried to explain it, because honestly, with the Lupin thing, you didn't need to explain it, because the characters are who they're supposed to be. And yeah, you might have it in some of the other interpretations, and this one is one of them where they do dig into the backstory a little bit. But by and large, you don't have to. They're on capers. They're on heists. They're trying to get money. They're trying to get, not fame, but, sometimes they are. They're trying to make daring escapes. They're the ones doing the phantom thieving and reveling in it, as opposed to the phantom thieves in Persona 5 who are supposed to be silent because they're fucking teenagers. But whatever. But the general idea is that Lupin can kind of switch back and forth between being very sleazy and very dark. And it works both ways, because he's not meant to be a good guy. He's meant to be an anti-hero. And he's going against the law. So to play a show focused on his opposite, the just absolute femme fatale who can outwit him in terms of costuming, in terms of acting skills, in terms of using her body, because that is something Lupin can do with the females. But by and large, it is Fujiko's job to use her body to seduce people, and they really, really, really amped it up in this interpretation. It's only about 10 to 12 episodes, but what they go for is very skeezy, very sleazy, very dark interpretations, very episodic until near the end. But again, very episodic kind of goes with the territory with this, because you don't really have to have much. But this is also exploring a different side of relationships. This is kind of set where, unlike a lot of the other shows where Fujiko's already known and they don't trust her at all, a lot of this is its own version, its own spin-off. So this Fujiko may or may not be the one from Lupin the Third Part 2, where there's a lot of goofiness and it's played for laughs, and it's in the English version, the Tony Oliver version, which is the one I remember from Adult Swim. And that was one thing. This one has Sonny Strait, the guy who was Maze Hughes in Fullmetal Alchemist, he plays him a lot more by the book. You still have him, making weird excursions, but his interpretation is going to be a lot of, I kind of know what you're doing, and it's not going to go well. He's ahead of everyone else. He's thinking, he's playing human chess as he's speaking, sort of vibe, because that's what he has to do. Oliver's interpretation in the part 2, the comedic version, is he's just kind of goofing off and being rambunctious and all this. The version here and elsewhere, and it could have to do with the suits. I don't know particularly. I know that there's been red, green, and black. I don't think I've watched a version with the black suit Lupin, but I know this one is the green one, so bear that in mind when I mention this. Is again, it could just be the mentality of that version is he's darker and can kind of dig deeper into that human chest. Just craze. But again, he is the secondary main character for a change because we're following Fujiko most of the time. So you're kind of splitting between serving the Lupin side of things, where he's going to be the main driving force in several of the episodes, but he's not always there because this is Fujiko-centric. Sometimes you're just following Fujiko along for her own capers. But again, you're meeting Lupin. She's meeting Lupin for the first time, so they're not necessarily people that have met. You don't have that backlog of, oh, I know you, I know what you're gonna do to me, let's team up or let's face off against each other, which they do, for several episodes. But then you also have Jigen or Goemon or Zenigata, so their relationships are different in this because they're trying to tell a larger story as Fujiko. And again, this is not, I don't know if this is meant to be her canon backstory. It would explain a lot, because the best way I would describe her backstory is Black Widow. The super spy, super agent girl who's been trained to use her body. Sleazier Black Widow is the best way I would describe it. This show leans hard into the sexuality, almost a bit too much. Now, it does it in the 70s mode where they're not, like, the Lupin look has never been the best look or the most stylish look. It's sticking with that very early 70s style where the bodies are not always like picturesque and picture perfect, but you can still do enough and see enough of the blurry lines and make your own interpretations. If you're somebody who likes the skis and doesn't mind seeing a woman get her tits out, this is the show for you. But it can be uncomfortable sometimes because, God, it happens. I remember a joke. I remember a joke I made one time in Jackbox. It was a joke where it said, "It's not anime unless blank." And I said, an anime girl gets naked in the opening or the ending scene. Because that's always what happens. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but a girl always gets naked, whether it's viable or not. Not even a Sailor Moon transformation, just they're in a dark room or they're obscured, they're naked because people are pervs. This show is the embodiment of that, where yes, it makes sense that she would be using her body and doing that a lot, but there are sometimes where she's just sitting at a pool and nope, no swimsuit, just nope, nude. She'll be in her room next to a person and nope, nude. Oh, she fought somebody. Nope, nude. They're trying to tell you something, but they're also, it's odd because they're trying to show a point that she's trying to get revenge on certain people that have these like owl masks, owl heads, these very sleazy dudes that are using drugs and whatever in other countries to just kind of manipulate things behind the scenes, using orphans or using females in certain ways and building them up via manipulations and whatever to do all that. And she's trying to get her revenge on all the shit that certain ones of them have perpetrated. It is a mind fuck of a Lupin show. It still does a lot of weird capers, and I think some of my favorite ones were with Jigen specifically, because they play him very standoffish, because Chris Sabat plays him in this, and it makes sense because I'm so used to the way the part 2 actors did it, and I thought it was funny that the guy who played Jigen in part 2 ended up playing Zenigata in this, Richard Epcar. And if you know anything about Epcar and how he does like Bato or something from Ghost in the Shell, it's like, yeah, that kind of fits. Because Zenigata, again, is just in a comedic role. He's the dork. And he just like, crap. You know, none of that here. No, he is the main, I'm going to fucking murder these people if I have to. Not that he does, but he will use and abuse people if he has to get what he needs. And again, Fujiko seduces him on occasion, and even he's just like, I didn't feel nothing. I was just like, fuck. All right. So they play him very stone-faced. You even have, so again, Jigen plays this like loner dude who knows love but can't really find love, but is kind of a hired hitman, and his gun, he's the best hitman in the world, and he kind of does some things. He does a pyramid mission where he kind of fights with Lupin and Fujiko over this treasure that exists, but he's got to solve a mystery in the pyramid before it goes. But it could be subterfuge to just up and kill them, because let's face it, if you can get rid of Lupin, Jigen, and Goemon, you try and do it, because they are just great at their jobs. So again, Jigen is very standoffish and just plays a great foil. You have Goemon, played by Mike McFarlane in the English version, who does Master Roshi. I never really watched Dragon Ball, so don't quote me on it, but I found it weird that Goemon actually has a thing for Fujiko in this. Like, he pines for her and forgets her name and whatever, but knows. There was an episode where she helps him save people on a train that's going to run into a tracks or whatever, and he kind of pines over her in his own way, which is kind of endearing, because you don't really know what her allegiances ever lie. And you don't know if she's ever going to fall for anybody, even Lupin half the time. So it's like, would that even work? Would Goemon and Fujiko ever work in a situation, because they're oil and water? But again, they do play Fujiko a lot softer. Speaking of actors, getting Michelle Ruff to play Fujiko again after she did part 2 was a nice touch, because Funimation usually doesn't do that. Funimation usually uses their own actors, but to get people who were in the LA version and bring them back in different ways, or to reuse them, was a nice touch. It's more of that whole legacy character thing, because again, you don't have to do that. You can always change actors and whatever, but Michelle Ruff knew that character in that part 2 series. Again, she played her about the same as you would play her in this, but it's just fucking dark. The opening is interesting. A couple more things about this, rather than going episode by episode. The opening is the most unique thing I think I've ever seen as far as openers go. There is music. It is a music video, and I guess you would call it a song, but it's more just Fujiko narrating stuff over scenes of, like, not still imagery, but like stencil and whatever drawings of her. And again, the OP and ED, the ED does a lot more jazzy, down to earth music, but again, a lot of just focusing on the sex appeal and just, God, overdoing it, excess to an extent. But again, this is the character we're digging into. This is what we're going to focus on. So again, she's narrating the opening rather than having a song, really, which is distinctive. Another thing that I thought was interesting was the side character next to Zenigata, Lieutenant Oscar. Josh Grell plays him in this, and to say he has a thing for Zenigata is underestimating it and understating it. It almost veers not even into admiration sometimes. Because admiration implies, hey, this is a person I admire and respect and want to do the best for. This almost veers into, I want to impress him so much that he looks at me as something more. They don't come out and say it, but they do just as much as they possibly can. And Oscar is like, what, 10 years younger than Zenigata is? You know, Zenigata is usually like 30, 35, 40. Oscar is 17, 18. You know, it gets uncomfortable. And again, Grell does fine, and Zenigata, again, Epcar is amazing. Even in this distinct version of Zenigata I'm not used to. But the stuff they give them is just fucked up. And no, I'm not saying it in the context of male on male. I'm giving it on the relationship dynamic because of the age gap and their relationship. It's almost like teacher-student sort of situation. I would not do that. I would not even think of venturing into that at all. Maybe male, female would be a little easier, but at the same time, there's still an age dynamic and an age discrepancy you have to think of there. And it doesn't help that is kind of what Oscar's role is in there, is to be the foil for Zenigata and do some of the stuff that Zenigata won't do. So, again, does it fit the narrative? Yes, it does. It is a dark exploitation of what sexuality can be as a weapon and as a personality trait. Sexuality is powerful. And this is as far an exploration as you can get, and it makes sense given the Lupin license, the Fujiko license. That alone, I think, because that works. There are ways you can exploit it, and I don't know if it goes even worse, because it could go darker if it wanted to, but they're good enough to like rear back enough that they don't show you everything. At most, they'll show you Fujiko naked, or they'll reference, hey, they had sex. Ooh boy. They're smart enough to keep a lot of that off camera and suggestive, and that actually helps. Until they do the reveals later in the episodes where, okay, they're digging into Fujiko's backstory, the pseudo Black Widow setup. Again, Black Widow was raised from an early age to be an assassin. Fujiko, kind of in the same way, but done differently. More of a test subject and a research orphan kind of thing. I don't know. But again, it isn't an easy watch, but it is an enthralling watch, and it only lasts about 10 or 12 episodes. So if you don't mind the darker exploration of a character that really, I mean, you're not meant to dig deep into them unless, like, they do it as a funny joke. I don't remember Lupin ever needing a backstory, to describe. These are archetypes, but they're good archetypes, and you know from episode to episode what you're getting. You know if you have Lupin on, you know what you're getting. This is a darker version and just a sleaze-filled version of that. But if you're looking for something less comedic and you want something almost too serious to a fault, but still with kind of a wink and a nod to the fact that it's a joke, where everybody's in on the joke without it being funny, you're gonna enjoy it. Because if you're looking for something where it is serious, but you know that it's too damn just to be taken seriously sometimes, and they know it, and they revel in it, and you just want that sort of, these are thieves, these are killers, these are hired hitmen, these are whatever, doing a thieving and hitmen and seducing things, you're going to get that. And I think you'd enjoy it, whether you're a Lupin fan or just going into it out of nowhere. Again, if you want very adult version of this material, or just want something very adult and we're like, I'm kind of in that mood for something, this is something to fit that bill. But that will do it for me. And I will say, rewatching this show got me to remember everything about it. Ooh dear. But that'll do it for this week. Next week is Rogue Galaxy. Space opera. Well, not space opera, but speaking of thieves and piratey. Space piratey stuff. Then you've got Tenchi, Muyo, and Universe. Oh god, I love those. Final Fantasy V, obviously I love that, otherwise I wouldn't be playing it. Snow White and the Red Hair. Soul Hackers 2, which I don't think gets enough love, but I also understand why it doesn't. And 86. Much better show than I thought going in, and man, it stayed the course the whole way. So I'm good for a couple of months. But that should do for me, and I will see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.